Hello.
Welcome to this class, week 10, and I'll get the gallery view going here. So I have a bunch of information for you regarding grades and so forth. You know, the first two assignments you've already completed. Well, not everyone has turned in the paper, but for those of you who have, as well as the first few, several midterms I've graded, about a dozen of them. And so let me admit we got a couple more people here. Just a second. All right. And if you want to unmute yourself, you know you can. So that's up to you individually. All right. First of all, on the midterms, no surprise. It was an open book test. So no one's gotten that I've graded yet. This is not proof that everyone will end up with an A, but so far they're all A's. Some A minuses, some A pluses, but in case an A is an A, and that the points, of course, mean 90. In fact, no one got even that 90 so far. It's an open book exam, and I have mixed feelings about the value of it at all. But the fact that, you know, everyone I've read so far, every test has had conscientious, fairly thorough answers based on the notes. That's what I was looking for. If you want to know what the two biggest items that were most commonly missed were, one was, I don't know if I call it a trick question about the ziggurats. Several people got that right, but a majority didn't. The true-false question, that they are not always step cities. They sometimes were, or, you know, and so that's, you know, it's only 2 points. So that was one. And then the only other thing is that some people were a little shorter than on, but not on all three answers on the essay part. Maybe they only gave 5 elements of composition, or they gave, you know, 5 facts about the meaning. Again, that's only what, 1 point. So if you did that twice, you'd still end up with 98. And if you miss one of the true false, you'd have 96. So the grades are coming in very close to that level. Let me admit this one more person now. Okay, so far I can only tell you that it's going to take at least the full 2 weeks to grade and the midterms and get them back to you, is because is that what we have is a situation that I could have, you know, known if I'd done this I never had before, which is that not all the tests were equally what's the word, editable. And it's on me because I didn't think to ask you to make sure you submitted an editable, though I assume they would be. The free PDF is supposed to be, but it isn't on my computer and 2 of my 3 readers. That's not a means anything about your grade. It has no effect on your grade. And it just means that we can only give you the raw score and a summary of how you did, unless you're one of those that my long-term reader, who's been, I've told you several times, this is one reader I've worked with for almost 2 years now. She does this for other classes and not just mine. For some reason, she can always open every PDF she ever gets. But I know it's not just me, because my wife and daughter, both tech savvy, as I've told you, more than I'll ever be. They had trouble figuring out why, you know, and I downloaded the Acrobat Adobe free system on this laptop to make sure I could, you know, grade them, the ones I grade here, and also when I sent them to the readers, that hopefully they could too, but for some reason the majority weren't. So it just means that we just have to keep a written record separately, like, you know, it's sort of like a cover sheet of what you did, how you got the scores you got. But since nobody's going to get a bad grade, almost everybody's going to get an A unless somebody turned in a test without answering one of the questions at all or barely. I doubt that. But in any case, that isn't going to affect anyone's grade in any way. I'm just giving a heads up. I won't be able to send you the whole test back. I thought I might be able to, but that isn't going to be possible. But I understand that's not always the case in other classes anyway, on Zoom classes. Okay, the papers. Excellent. Overall, a few people forgot a few things, and so they could have gotten a little bit better grade, but nobody bombed the paper. On those, I think you all saw the email I sent, and if you didn't, if you missed the last several days, you know, since our last meeting, I sent an email out, I think it was on Thursday of last week, mentioning that it's my also somewhat of my oversight, because I only mentioned it once or twice at the very beginning. So now I'm going to make sure I email everyone before the second paper to please include your email address on the cover sheet. You might have to hand print it. You know, print, please don't use cursive or type it in. I know there's no place for it on the arranged sheet, but there's room for that, and you've all written your names in, so you can do that. Add just, that one thing. That way we can get back the actual cover sheet so you can see the complete, and plus it's easier for me to log the grades in and make sure I keep them correct, entered in each of the grade rosters. And doesn't take like 10 minutes per test or more to do that. If your email address is right there, I don't have to go look it up. So if you're one of those people who hasn't yet sent me your email in a separate email saying, please send me my paper grade and or cover sheet, I can't guarantee I can share the cover sheet, because if I graded, I just explained, I don't know why I can't do that. So what I did was hand print out a cover sheet, and I can mail that to you if you really need that for any reason. But at this point, I think the main thing is the feedback, the summary of how you did, what you might have missed, and the points for both papers. That you can definitely get back if you haven't already. Most people sent me their email address. It looks like about a dozen didn't. If you're one of those, or someone else who's not here tonight who hasn't yet sent me their email address, they should do so, because I'll be so busy. I'll be focused on grading the midterms and getting them back and entering them in the roll book. So I might forget to send yet one more reminder. Okay, so anybody who didn't get your grade for your first paper, then you just need to send me your email address as a request. Okay, any questions at all now about anything before tonight we're gonna do a slightly shorter class, not as short as we did last time because we didn't have a second half. We will take an earlier break. It's hard to say, 10, 15 minutes earlier than usual, and end earlier. It's hard to say. It could even be as early as 9:15, 9:20, probably close to 9:30, depending on, how things go. But before we get to tonight's topic and the background, I always like to give you context of the topic itself, what we're going to cover, and the historical setting for these works of art. Does anybody have any questions at this point that I haven't already answered about your grades on your papers, or the forthcoming grades that I'll be able to send only the actual scores and a summary of how you did for most of the midterm grades? Any questions at all? Okay, I have one more thing to say before we start the lecture for tonight. Extra credit. Now, most of you feel like you probably don't need it, but if you were one of those who didn't get an A or even a B, as a few people didn't on their first paper, and even if you get an A on the midterm, that wouldn't average out to an A. So to make sure you have a shot at getting an A, almost a guarantee, if you do all the extra credit, you're going to raise your grade 1 whole point. So I'm going to, rather than belabor the details now, I'm going to briefly recap verbally and then send a little more information or detailed email about what the extra credit options are, because we only talked about them once at the first week of class. Okay, the easiest ones are sending me articles or images of a work of art that you yourself created, whether it's a photo, a painting, a drawing, mosaic or something, a sculpture, with your name and the title of what it was, or an article about art that's at least one full page in length, not a little, 140 character tweet type thing. So something more substantial about any visual art topic that interests you. Each time you do that is worth 5 points. The next easiest option is to download and show me, the evidence that you did that of either of the 2 art-related novels I wrote, which I've already mentioned, but if you weren't here the first night of class, they were vetted by the administration. They were both accepted by the art department for the covers of which were in, probably none of you were students then, 3 years ago at the art museum on campus, back when we used to have a museum. It was in the library at the ground floor of Doyle Library, if you didn't know that. Not that that is of any extra credit value now, since you can't go there. But that leads to another, or the third option, going to a museum. Guess what you can now in San Francisco? They just entered the yellow zone. I don't know if you heard that. They have the least infection rate and lowest, positivity rate of any county. I think it's any county in the state of California. I think it's the first county to do that. So they've got the Frida Kahlo exhibit up. I wanted to go see it. I had a couple of friends I was planning to go see it with, and slam, the door got shut, of course. And yet they kept all the paintings on the walls, and now it's open through February 7th. I just double checked. So you could go to the museum that DeYoung is in Golden Gate Park and show me a receipt for that, your name and date, proof that you had actually went in the museum. Whatever you did inside the museum is your business, and that's worth 10 points. I didn't finish though on the 2 novels. For downloading them, if you read them or not, either way, as long as I see you downloaded them, I assume you will at least want to glance at them, but that's your business. That's worth 15 points. And if you write a review, that would assume you did read at least most, if not all of either one. They are South Side Story about Chicago in the 1960s, which is more than a little relevant to what we've been seeing, especially since the whole George Floyd episode. I wrote that 20 years ago, and it was accepted by a publisher, and then we had the recession of 2000, and publishers were cutting back on unknown authors. Obviously, I was one of those. So they reneged on publishing it, but it's on Amazon Kindle, which is free if you have Amazon Prime or Amazon, I forget what they call it, Select or something. And it's like $3 or $4 if you don't. Anyway, that's an option, and you can ignore it, or you can just download it and get the 15 points if you show me proof that you did that before the end of the semester. If you review it, it doesn't have to be a good or bad review, long, short, it's whatever you want to write, as long as it's, posted on Amazon about either books. Or the second one is architecture and crime combination of themes of Russian mafia and architectural history. Believe it or not, those two actually intersected in a novel I also wrote over 25 years ago called The Open House Murders, and that one is also on Amazon Kindle. So that's another option. And then, so if you did both of those things, downloaded just one of them and then reviewed it, that's 25 points. And then you can get 10 points for going to the museum. And then finally, I added a new one since we all became remote with this new era we're in, to write a 2-page article. First, watch a movie or a documentary. It has to be at least an hour if it's a documentary, about any artist, anything about that artist's work or their life. I mean, there's so many good movies out there. Frida, if you don't know that one, about Frida Kahlo, one of the best movies I've ever seen about the life of an artist. Lust for Life, the best movie I know. I'll go out on a limb. Some of you may watch and say, why do you like it that much? Well, I know Kurt, was not the choice. He just died at 104, didn't he? Yeah, Kurt Douglas played Van Gogh, but you forget you're watching Kirk Douglas. He does such a good job, and the descendants of Van Gogh's family said that about his performance. He was nominated for the best actor. He didn't win it. The guy that played Gauguin in that movie, who is a Mexican-American, wonderful actor, won best supporting actor for portraying Gauguin. That's a superb movie, Lust for Life. It's on, I know it's on Amazon. I think it might also be on Netflix. And anytime you watch a movie about any artist, doesn't matter what period, what style, what era, then you just write a 2-page summary of what you learned about the artist and about their art. And there's no points off for spelling or grammar or anything. And email that to me, and that's worth 10 points. Okay. So any questions now about anything we just covered? All right, here's a little, I'm going to go to the speaker view thing, and I know it's going to take a moment to, I think we do it this way. Yeah, there we go. Let me get my little thumbnail out of the area there. Okay, so today or tonight, we are going to be talking about, now, the phrase early Christian art is somewhat misleading, because it might sound like it's all about only objects of religious worship or something. That's not what we will see a couple like that. What we're talking about is the period there are different terms for it in different historical texts or historians' summations. Some people call it late Roman art. Others call it late antiquity. The World of Late Antiquity was a best-selling book on history, believe it or not, when I was at UC Berkeley. Excellent book. I still own it. Good enough I've kept it for 35, 40 years. And it talks about what changed when Rome became a Christian, officially authorized Christianity, legalized it, obviously, accepted it. And the emperor converted. His name was Constantine. Some of you may know about this. We're going to start with a slide about him from the syllabus. And there'll be several references to him tonight, because he's the last great Roman emperor. He unified the empire when it was about to fall apart in the early 4th century, 300s. He ruled second longest. I'll repeat this. I'll take this notes now when we get to the first slide. Second longest of all Roman emperors in terms of his length of his rule was 37 years. That's a long time in the ancient world. And he introduced Christianity to the broader population because he and his whole family converted. And I'll explain how and why and how that influenced the art of that era. And then he did one more thing that we're still being affected by, and that is that he created the Byzantine Empire, in essence. Well, no, he didn't create the empire. He broke the Roman Empire into two halves right before he died, so that when he left, the next 160 or 50 years of emperors were divided between an Eastern Empire, which began to decay, got corrupt, slowly fell apart from, internal strife and bad rulers for many, many decades. But the eastern half of the empire became the Orthodox Church. Some of you know this, right? There are Greek and Russian Orthodox and Ukrainian Orthodox churches all over the world. There are tens of millions of Orthodox Christians in the Western Hemisphere. They immigrated from that part of the world, which is now where Turkey is, where it started. But they spread after the Roman Empire fell into they became that area of what once was the eastern half of the Roman Empire, which was separated by Constantine because he felt the empire was too large, too unwieldy to be ruled from just one city. So he created this city called Constantinople, of course, named after himself, that is now Istanbul. You've all heard of Istanbul, right? Some people think it's the capital of Turkey. No, it used to be. It's the largest city in Turkey, but originally it was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, and that empire left a legacy we are still, I will say, benefiting from. How so? 1,500 years later. Well, I'll explain that with several of the slides. So we're really looking at late Roman and Byzantine art. So here's the first image. Again, low tech as it is, I think this works pretty well in this format. I've done it before. I'm going to hold this up for up to 2 minutes so you can look at it, or 90 seconds at least, and see what we're going to be looking at in several of the slides. And it's from the terms, the list of terms to know. So here I illustrated it. I had to make 3 versions before I got it nearly symmetrical, right? This is the shape of all true Greek Orthodox churches. When we say Greek Orthodox, that word now implies all the Eastern Orthodox denominations. It's a subcategory. The word denomination you may not know, but Christianity is divided into, just like every religion is. There are different branches, right? Obviously, there's Catholicism and Protestantism, but there's a lot more than that, and not just the Mormons, that's one, and the Jehovah's Witnesses, there's another. But the most numerous, other than after, within Christianity, the 3 largest groups are, in order, Catholicism, about 1 1/3 billion, Protestants, about 750 million, and Eastern Orthodox, which includes Russian, Greek, Romanian, Ukrainian. They're all over the world. Of course, their biggest numbers are in Eastern Europe, particularly in Russia. And that's about 500 million people. It's a lot of people. So their churches look like this. Well, not like this drawing, but their floor plans do. So that's called the Greek cross floor plan, because the shape of the building, the outer walls, form the shape of a Greek cross. There's really no other way to describe it, unless you want to break it down and say, well, that means which the arms of that kind of cross, Greek cross, are all equal. Unlike the Catholic and other versions of the crosses that they use for, all the statues of Jesus and so forth, those aren't equal armed. Of course, those are more Catholic origins. So this is called the Greek cross floor plan. That's why I do the double arrows pointing to the outer walls. Then the apse, that's actually a definition I'll be giving you during the lecture. We'll see some examples. Is this little projection at the corners of the outer walls, help support the weight of the building. We'll give you the definition in a little while. And then finally, the most amazing thing invented by the Byzantines, not the Romans, they didn't know how to do this, was a dome on Pendantes. Now I ran out of, see, I couldn't put the S there, but each one of the corners is a pendentive. The dome rests, in other words, on the corners. And by doing that, it might seem like, well, so what? What difference does that make? A dome is a dome. No, actually, it's a big, big advance. Technologically and architecturally, because you can put these incredibly tall, wide, heavy domes, much larger domes, on the outer walls, resting, I should say, on the corners and the edges of the outer walls. By doing that, you make them much stronger, and the domes can be much heavier. So you're going to see the proof of that. Well, that'll be after the break, probably, when we get to the Byzantine churches. Okay. So now let's hope this does the screen share as quickly as it has sometimes. It always seems to have a mind of its own. Let's see. Okay. All right. Now my screen shows that this image, it's full screen, and it's not a frozen image because it's got the arrow pointing to the other slides I'm going to show. Can everybody see this? Well,
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Perfect. I just need one person to confirm because I don't want to proceed if there's any glitches. All right. So this is the first must know for tonight. This is the Arch of Constantine, and that's A-R-C-H, of course, the word arch, of Constantine is spelled C-O-N-S-T-A-N-T-I-N-E. Again, C-O-N-S-T-A-N-T-I-N-E. Rome. 3 location is Rome, and the date is 315. Now we're not using AD or CE, which we were before the midterm, because now we're in the Common Era, or the AD periods. So you don't need those letters next to the dates, which you would have needed to get all the dates correct on the midterm, right? So at this point, you could dispense with that. It's just the date, the number of the year in the Common Era. So it's 315. All right. This is one I'm not cutting from the study list. Again, I always try to give you guys a heads up to let you know that this is one that's really going to have a high possibility of being on the final. Now, I may modify the format of the final. I have to give that some thought, see how it goes after I get them all back and graded, and talk to a couple other teachers and my readers and so forth. I'll give it some thought. I may make a different version or format, but there will be some kind of final. I guarantee that. Of course, not just one more paper. There'll be 2 more assignments. So you're halfway through in terms of the point totals for your assignments. Now, of course, each of the first 2, the first paper and the midterm, were each worth equally 100 points. Okay, so this could be on the final in one way or another. Okay, why is it so important? Well, this is a monument, a double monument, or you could say it's a monument. You could write it this way: a monument that has it commemorates 2 important events. There we go. It's you could say dual monument, but see, that sounds like 2 monuments side by side, so I wouldn't use that phrase. Just say it's a monument that has a dual purpose. There we go. Commemorates 2 major events. What were those? Well, first, like all triumphal arches, and I didn't say that, but if you didn't already know from your study for the midterm, this is a triumphal arch, like all the other Roman arches, triumphal arches before that. So it starts, the purpose first that you should write about in the meaning is, starts out as just to commemorate a military victory by the Roman army. And what victory was that? It was Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, that's why it's, of course, named after him, won a major battle against his rivals. They were trying to overthrow him. It wasn't quite a civil war, like Augustus had to fight 2 of those, but it was more than one battle. And, he had to defeat them. Well, actually, it wasn't single battle. What am I saying? It was a rebellion against him by some other Roman generals who wanted to take over the throne, become emperor. And they united to oppose him, and he defeated them all in one big battle. Oh, here we go with that internet connection thing. Stop. Okay. Now that I didn't mean to go forward to, so we'll get to that. All right. So to give you the context first, and then we'll see some details. So the first thing this did was commemorate a major military victory by the Emperor Constantine over his rivals in a big battle. But a much more important aspect of the meaning is that it also is a monument to religious tolerance. That ought to make some of you go, huh? I would think, or at least mildly curious. What the heck? Religious tolerance? What's that have to do with any of the ancient world? Wasn't known for tolerance. Any of the cultures, some more than others. We found out the Egyptians were much more tolerant of people of different ethnic backgrounds than almost any other. And of course, the Minoans were rare examples of truly gender, neutral or equal in their treatment of male and female members of their culture, but that's rare. So what do we mean when we say this is a monument to religious tolerance? It commemorates the conversion. The second purpose of it is to commemorate the conversion of the Emperor Constantine to Christianity and his making Christianity legal throughout the Roman Empire. That is a very important date. Once again, this, I'll repeat it slowly. Second purpose for this monument is that it's a monument to religious tolerance because it commemorates the conversion of the Emperor Constantine to Christianity and his declaration that Christianity would be legal throughout the Roman Empire. Now, did he force people to convert? There are people who think that. There are historians who try to make that case. The evidence doesn't show that. There were tens of millions of people in the Roman Empire, actually over 200 million. And he didn't force people to convert. But because he was the emperor and his whole family also converted and all of his advisors, it just was by example and powerful inducement, I should say. In other words, by example, when he converted Christianity, most of the upper classes within a few years, well, say several years, certainly before he died, had converted to Christianity too. So it became, in other words, Christianity, by the time he died, though he didn't declare it officially, the religion of the new religion of the Roman Empire. It became pretty much the official religion of the ruling classes and then of the general Italian population. Beyond Italy, it was voluntary. Well, it was in Italy too, whether you wanted to convert to this so-called new religion. It was already 300 years old, but it was still new by comparison with the ancient Roman religions, or gods, I should say. So once more, it commemorates a military victory over Constantine's rival in a major battle, and it also commemorates his conversion to Christianity and his declaring that Christianity shall be legal from that point on. That's a major act of religious tolerance, and in case it's not clear enough, this Latin inscription, which I've had a very knowledgeable historian, a friend of mine that lives in Italy, with me when I last was in Rome, and he didn't translate it verbatim, but he said the gist of it is that from this point on, the citizens of the Roman Empire, not just of the city or the province of Italy, but all of the empire, are free to worship whatever god they choose. Well, that's really enlightened. So he was saying to the world with this monument, not just Christianity is no longer outlawed and I'm not going to persecute Christians and I am now one, but whatever religion you want to practice, it's up to you. That's a rather remarkable statement for that far back. Okay, and then lastly, you might find this odd, but he said why, when he was asked, of course he was asked, when he came back from that battle and he suddenly says, now I'm a Christian. Well, why? In the middle of, he'd been on the throne for years. He was in his 30s. Well, I saw a vision. You could write this if you want as part of the meaning. What made him decide to do that, to become a Christian and to declare it legal as a religion throughout the empire, was he said he had a vision on the night before the battle, that there was a fiery cross in the sky, and he thought that meant that God, the Christian God, was telling him to convert. You make of that what you will, but that's what he said. And he maintained that till the day he died, that actually happened, or he saw that vision of a fiery cross in the sky above the battlefield, which would tell him if he converted into this new religion, he'd win the battle and be successful. So that's what he says was his reason. Okay, what else we can say about it is about Constantine himself. I already mentioned this, but look, here he is. He was the tallest Roman emperor. So you can write these as other facts about me, because this is all indication, these facts are indicated by the details on the actual arch. That's where the arrow is pointing. You see him there? He was 6'4", by far the tallest emperor, just like Lincoln was our tallest president, right? 6'4". We haven't had one that tall since. Okay, so here he is, about a head, almost taller than the other generals around him. And who are these? These are the defeated generals surrendering and asking for mercy. And guess what? He did. He did not execute them. Right there, that shows something changed, because that wasn't the way the Roman emperors treated their defeated enemies. We know that from past lectures, right? And from your own knowledge. They usually were severe, literally and figuratively, to punish in some way their defeated enemies. He let those armies under these generals go back to their homes and keep their weapons. And he let the commanders rejoin his army, the Roman army, and didn't punish them. And of course, guess what? Some of them chose to convert to this new religion, partly because of that. So there he is, accepting the surrender and granting mercy to his defeated enemies. At least that's what most people interpret this scene as. We know that happened, so that's probably what this scene is. And then this would be him in battle here, riding his horse into battle. And then there are the old Roman gods are still shown on here. They were the same, remember, as the Greeks, so the Greek and Roman gods are still shown here because he didn't outlaw them. He didn't force people to convert. There are, like I said, some historians who try to prove that he forced people to convert because it happened so quickly. Millions of people converted to Christianity within a few years after he did. Not just in Italy either, but, there's no proof that. He certainly didn't pass a law that said if you don't become a Christian, you will be punished or you won't get a good job or you'll be, given only, low second-rate status. He didn't decree that you had to convert. Okay, so these are bas-reliefs. And let's see, I might have another view here. I think this is the only other view. No, I don't. So, okay, let's go back. That'll be the next must know. So if it's on the exam, this is the view you'll have, the full view. All right, so we'll start with, for formal analysis, the color. It's a cool grayish white. You could say off-white or whitish gray if you prefer. It's definitely not warm. And then we have balance. Well, every triumphal arch I've ever seen is, in any part of the world, not just ancient Roman ones, clearly it's symmetrical, totally. But you could make the case it's weighted or unbalanced toward the top, couldn't you, if you drew the line here, because this is empty space. So you could say it's unbalanced toward the top, totally symmetrical, balanced left to right. Then we have the rhythm of the columns. The medallions are called. You could say circles, but that's really not the right word. Medallions are these bas-relief panels, like I just showed you a couple of them right here. And so those create rhythm, of course, so do the arches, underneath which the Roman soldiers who fought with him in that battle marched when they opened this arch. It would have been a big celebration, probably a week-long party or something. Don't write that. But they would have had more than one day to celebrate his victory when he got back to Rome. So that creates rhythm. The arches, the medallions, that's really the right word, the columns, and then the sculpture. These are some of the generals that fought with him in that battle to win against his enemies here. At least that's what most historians believe. Okay, so then we have for texture, well, of course, it's the smooth texture of marble. Yes, it is. Most triumphal arches are marble. It's what Romans usually use to build these arches. But there are, of course, carved lines, as you can see, with the inscription declaring Christianity now being legal and that the rest of the empire can worship any gods they wish. That statement about religious tolerance. That's carved line, but it's also carved line on the figures. And those figures are, let's go up close, of course, full of simulated texture. The hair, the clothing, the armor. So there's plenty of simulated textures as well as the real texture. And then we have its dynamic on the arches. And you could say the medallions, but just the outer edges. Everything else is stable. The walls, the columns, the figures, the human figures are almost all standing upright. I think there was one, riding a horse somewhere, but mostly these are, straight upright figures. Maybe the gods in the little niches here. So, but it's mostly stable, except for the archways. For space, it's real space. It is about a 50-foot high stone monument with a 30-foot high arch in the middle, and two 20-foot high arches, one 20-foot high arch on each side, or one on either end. So that's roughly real space, of course. There is no overlapping, of course, of the figures over the background or each other. Okay, there's no modeling. Well, there is when the sun hits it, but it isn't happening here. And I would call it a single mass. Okay, let's move on. Now, this is an odd picture. Don't ask me who that woman is. I have no idea. It was in the slide library from the year I started teaching in 1997. So I'm sure it was taken long before that. Some probably, sabbatical by a Santa Rosa JC professor and or his wife or two professors, whatever. Ignore that woman leaning on the elbow here, okay? So we're going to focus on the head of Constantine. So I just want you to see the context. So this is the next must know. Okay. Head, of course, everyone knows how to spell head of, and I already spelled Constantine, but I will spell it again. Constantine, head of Constantine, Rome location, and the date is 326. Again, you don't need the AD or CE. Okay, what are we looking at here? Well, it is only the head and neck, one of only two fragments that still exist or have survived, you could say surviving fragments, of what once was a colossal, actually it's three, colossal sculpture of Constantine that stood above the Roman Forum for most of his reign. So once again, the head and neck that we're going to focus on, but I want you to see again the context, are one part of only three remaining fragments of what was originally a colossal, that means much larger than life, right? Colossal scale or size, sculpture of Constantine. While he was emperor, it was erected probably by the Senate. Anyway, and it was stood above the forum. What's left besides his head, if you want to write that, is you could make part of the meaning, is the elbow and a kneecap. Strangely, those things were found buried during the Renaissance. But we're going to just concentrate on this. If it's on the exam, this would be the view. The head and neck. Okay, well, I already mentioned things about him. So under the meaning, were this to be on the slide analysis, I'm not saying it will or even has a high possibility, but for now, consider it at least a possibility. So do take good notes. We know now that he was the first Christian emperor. He's the one that legalized Christianity. And when he converted, it caused the upper classes throughout Italy to convert. Or many, not all, but many, actually most, majority to convert. Yet he still allowed other religions to be practiced. You also know that he was the second longest ruling emperor. You could just say over 35 years. There's a debate as to whether you should count the first 2 years because he wasn't the sole emperor, he was a joint ruler. So just say 35 years, over 35 years. It's a long time for any one ruler. And then we have the fact that he was the tallest. You could mention that. It's a minor detail, but he was 6'4", the tallest Roman emperor. And finally, much more important than that last fact is that he's the one that split the Roman Empire. When he died, he left instructions, you could say orders, or ordered the empire to be split into two halves. And the eastern half was ruled from a separate capital named after him, Constantinople. Do not ask me how to spell that. You can just write it how it sounds. Come on, I'm trying to get this. Okay, good. Back to the full view. So let's talk about what you see here in his face. Well, you see the evidence of his central, I say Eastern, that's overstating it, his Central European ethnic origins. What? Well, he's a Roman emperor. Must he have been Italian? No. He was born in Germany, in what's now a unified Germany, but it would have been back then, 50 years ago, when I first went to Europe as a student, on the border of Eastern Germany. And I'll just say, to keep it simple, don't have to say East and West, Central Europe. And he inherited genetic traits that are often associated with people from some, not all, but some parts of Eastern and Central Europe, such as enlarged eyes. Look how big those eyes are. You might think they're exaggerated. They're not. And he had a glandular condition, which some think is the same that Lincoln had, which makes you unusually tall. So for that far back, he's really unusual to have a 6 foot tall ruler of any kind. I mean, there were some in the history of the world, but it's rare. So it made you taller than normal. You can just say a glandular or hereditary, you can say it either way, condition that made him extra tall, and it gave him bulging eyes. Now, don't write this, but I can't resist. One of my students made this silly, corny joke about it. He said, he looks like the guy from Caddyshack. What was his name? Rodney Dangerfield, the actor. If you look at his eyes, there is a little similarity, but that's not so far-fetched because Rodney Dangerfield is a German Jewish background, and many Jews from Central Europe have that same set of features. You know, they're taller than the average person from their culture, A, and B, their eyes tend to be a little bit larger than others. So we don't think he had Jewish genes. There isn't any evidence of that, but he definitely was born outside Italy, and it is reflected in his genetic, the evidence of his genetic origins is reflected in his face. Okay, and then this was found, you can just say, during the Renaissance. I don't remember, what's a few hundred years ago, you can say, the pieces, the fragments, and re-erected in a museum courtyard is where it's on display now. Okay, formal analysis. Balanced? Yeah. No, it's a head and a neck, right? It's stable. The only things dynamic are his bowl cut. My mother used to cut our hair with a serving bowl over, or a cereal bowl over our head. I just had my daughter cut my hair, so if you guys think it doesn't look good, tell me and no, I'm kidding. She just did it right before class. Home style haircuts. That's dynamic, obviously, because of the curve and his eyes, and you could make the case both the nose and to some limited degree the mouth, but it's pretty much of a horizontal line. Otherwise, except for the details in the middle of his face and his hairline, it is mostly stable. And it is the same color as the marble was on the arch named after him, a cool off-white or cool grayish white color. Carved line creates the details of the face, of course, the lips, the nose, the eyes, and it's fairly realistic simulated texture, therefore. The rhythm is obvious. The hair, strands of hair, I guess you could say, and of course the eyes and the lips and the ears. The usual sense of rhythm. It's a single mass. And for space, I don't see really, maybe you could say the hair overlaps the forehead, I guess, but mostly it's a real three-dimensional space. By the way, I didn't say this. The original sculpture it came from was 45 feet tall, and this head is 9 feet. The head and neck combined is 9. So it's real space, 9 feet tall. Originally part of a 45-foot tall colossal sculpture. And there's no modeling except for the shadows created by the sun, of course. All right. Now this next work is another one that's really important. So I'll tell you as a heads up again, that's when I give you that, cue, then you should take extra thorough notes because I won't cut it from the study list. Okay, this is the third one down on the syllabus. Sarcophagus of Junius Bassus. So I'm going to spell all those words. Again, my aunt from Indiana, I don't know why, but for me, it worked when I was at UC Berkeley, having to memorize a lot more names and slides from art history classes than hundreds, literally, instead of dozens. Of course, you don't have to memorize them because it's an open book system, obviously. Sarcophagus is how my aunt would say it. Most people in Indiana I ever heard said it that way. Sarcophagus. Sarcophagus. Sarcophagus of Junius Bassus. What a classic Roman name. Junius, Junius, and Bassus is Bassus. Location, Rome again, 359. Okay, this is one of the earliest Christian sarcophaguses. Okay, remember what a sarcophagus is, but if you didn't get those notes, or if you've forgotten, or you threw those notes away, then you might want to add this to the meaning notes on this. Sarcophagus is a large stone or metal box containing the remains of a deceased human being, often with decorations on the outside. This is all of that. It's stone, it's carved. Junius Bassus's bones or corpse was kept in here for centuries. I don't know, it's still there. This is on display in the Vatican in Rome. I don't think the body's still there. And then it's carved with decorations, which are scenes from the Bible. Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on. But before we do that, we need to say, how did this, or why did this get created? Well, this is an example of the influence of Constantine. You just write it that way. That, I see some people want to maybe ask a chat question. Hang on. For me, it's easier if you do it with, now why is it not doing that? Oh, okay. Whoops. If there's a question, I should be able to see it. But I usually prefer to answer chat questions at the end of the first half, before the break is over, or at the end of the evening. But if you don't want to unmute yourself, that's one way. Then, well, I'm not getting any. So I will answer any questions, of course, you have, before we take the break, and again, before I sign off for this evening. So let's finish up on the meaning of this while I think we're just getting started. The fact is that this was an example of how Constantine influenced the upper classes, or ruling classes, of the Roman Empire to convert to Christianity. This guy wasn't born Christian. We know who he was. I think he was a senator. You don't have to say that. Just say he was an upper class or member of the ruling class of the Roman Empire, lived in Rome, and was born a pagan. Now, that's a word we're going to hear quite a bit. I can't remember if I've used it, but it's a good word to know. It's not on your listed terms to know, so it's not going to appear on the, fill in or true false section of the final if I have that section. But you should know it means non-Christian. That's a word Christians used to use, not too many do anymore, for anyone who wasn't Christian. So back then they would have said a Christian converting into Christianity from being a previous Roman god worshiper, right? The multiple gods of the Romans. Back then, there was this guy was born and raised a pagan, converted as an adult to Christianity because he was following the example of the emperor and Constantine and his family. And so that's why these scenes are all from the Bible. So now let's go. I think I have close-ups that don't require me to just do that. Yeah, there we go. What this scene, this part of the meaning now, depicts is supposedly Jesus looking like a young Greek philosopher, is what Stockstead says, but I can see why she says that or said that. It doesn't, no beard, no long hair, and of course we know he wasn't blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Anyway, it just shows him looking like a Middle Eastern philosopher, young man, sitting on his throne. Well, it's him in heaven, supposedly after he and his disciples had all died and supposedly gone to heaven. So it shows, in other words, to summarize it in a line or two, this scene depicts after Jesus had died and his disciples had also passed away, and they were all up in heaven. And Jesus is the guy in the middle, and we don't know who these two are, two of his disciples on either side. But there's an important detail. Now, this I will go up close to. What is Jesus doing with his sandals? He's wiping them, his feet, in essence, on the head of some kind of creature. Who is that? Well, it's the Roman god Atlas. Some of you know who he was. You don't have to know this much detail, but, it's part of the meaning you could add to your notes. Atlas was the ancient Greek and Roman. I forget if the Romans named or the Greeks, it doesn't matter. Atlas, though, if you just take his name, was the god of ancient Greece and Roman religion that they believed held up the sky. So he was a giant who could hold up the stars in the sky above, above the earth. That's, now, of course, we consider that a myth, obviously. So why is the figure of Jesus here shown, let's back up again, wiping his sandals on the head of an ancient Roman god? Can anybody guess? See if anybody's still. Well, it's because now the Christian religion had become dominant, at least in Italy. It had become dominant over the old pagan religion. And that's how it symbolized the new religion, symbolized by Jesus, wiping his feet on the forehead of an old pagan god. It's a bit of a diss, I guess you could say, if you want to look at it that way. Now we have two other scenes here from the Bible, then we'll do a formal analysis. And we'll do one more slide and take an early break. Okay, so here's Jesus riding into Jerusalem. That's supposed to be him, again, as a young man, you see there, while he was still alive, riding into Jerusalem. Supposedly he was riding a donkey. Well, this poor donkey is no bigger than a large dog. I mean, this is part of the meaning of this slide, that this level, by this time in the Roman Empire, most sculptors, just say most, had lost the ability to depict space and depth and proportion realistically. I'll say it again. Most Roman sculptures had lost the skills of the earlier periods and could not depict accurately depth, space, or proportions. And the proof is right here on this sarcophagus. I mean, he would crush this poor animal. I mean, he's like 2 times as big as the donkey at least. And then here we have supposedly cheering crowds that the Bible mentions greeted Jesus when he came into the city, just before he was arrested, right? Tried for treason, executed, of course. So this is just before he died. So this is supposed to be symbolic of the crowds that climbed into these 50, I've been to Jerusalem, the 50-foot tall trees outside some of the walls, not everywhere. So supposedly the Bible mentions the crowds were so large they had to climb into trees to look down on them. Well, they're taller than the trees that they're supposed to be climbing into. So it's, again, it's just evidence that this was a poorly done piece of sculpture in terms of proportion and depictions of depth or space. And then if that's not enough, the last detail we'll mention in the meaning is the Adam and Eve panel. If it wasn't for her long hair and even slight hint, well, I don't even see much of the physique that differentiates. You can hardly tell him from her. Their bodies are not very accurately depicted in terms of, classic traditional images of course, they've been already by this time for at least a long time. The Christians had been doing paintings and mosaics and sculptures of Adam and Eve, or, even line drawings in their early Bibles. So you can hardly tell the man from the woman. In fact, I had one student say she looks more buff than he does. So that's one mistake. Proportions of the two bodies don't really fit the roles of what the traditional stereotype, though they are images that they would have used in most earlier sculpture. And then this is supposed to be Satan, the devil, disguised as a snake, wrapping around the base of a 50-foot tall tree. Again, the snake is almost taller than the tree that he's supposed to be, overwhelmed by. Again, it's just evidence, yet more if any is needed, of how poorly designed these panels were when it comes to the realistic or lack of realistic depicting of space, depth, or proportion. But let's do the formal analysis. It is well done when it comes to simulated textures. You can see that with the carved lines on the clothing, the hair, and of course some of the details here, even if the proportions are off. There is only overlapping for space. Otherwise, like we said, there's no diminishing size, foreshortening, or anything other realistic depiction or technique to depict space. There's the obvious rhythm of the bodies, heads, arms, hands, legs. There is, let's see, modeling here. Yes, it is part of the design because that's how we can see the figures, since these are so deeply carved, they're almost not bas relief. They're high relief, it's called, like 3/4 round. But you can just say it's a form. It kind of is a variation on bas relief panels. But the recess behind them is of course, deeply shadowed, and that is where the modeling is. Otherwise, we couldn't see the figures. Okay, and then it's almost entirely stable. There's hardly anything dynamic except one or two little details here and there. Maybe even there, it's just the top of the heads mostly, and then maybe this guy's legs. But it's like almost entirely stable, and then each panel is balanced. And if you draw a line down the middle, left to right, or top to bottom, the entire sarcophagus is balanced, of course. And there is no larger or smaller masses here. They're all about the same size. Now, for color, you can't tell from this slide, so I'll let you just, if it's on, I'm not saying it will be, but if it is, it's not being cut from the set list, decide whether you think it's looks cool there. But the actual color is a warm color, okay? So I'll just tell you it's a warm pink, but if you write, it looks like cool gray, I wouldn't take points off because that's what you see in the slide. Okay, one more must know, and we'll take our break, an early break. This is the fourth slide for your notes. San Vitale, S-A-N, 2 words, the name of a church in Italy. San, like, short for saint. Vitale, like the word vital with an E. V-I-T-A-L-E. Ravenna, R-A-V-E-N-N-A. 547. Okay, so what is this? This is a Byzantine church. By this time, the Byzantine Empire had already become dominant throughout Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. So the way to write that is that after the fall of Rome, the western half of the Roman Empire, you could just say Rome, because Rome was the capital. After Rome fell, or the Western Empire fell, there was the Dark Ages, right? Chaos, violence, ignorance, witches being drowned. Yeah, I mean, if you saw Monty Python's Holy Grail. I don't know if anybody ever saw it. It was a pretty horrible period in the history of that area of the world. So the only area of education, enlightenment, and, kind of unified government was the eastern half of the empire, the Byzantines, and that's Byzantine. Now, you're not be held to the spelling of that because it's not on the syllabus, but you should write it correctly in your notes, because several more slides after the break we'll see are from the Byzantine Empire. Byzantine, the eastern half of the Roman Empire, which the most important fact, two facts about it are, it survived for another 1,000 years after the fall of Rome. It's a pretty major achievement. In the middle of the Dark Ages, they managed to keep their government and their religious beliefs. And the other half is that it kept classical art and learning and literature alive. And some historians, I believe this is correct, say there had been no Renaissance, no Enlightenment, no scientific advancement, or all the other things that came out of Renaissance, rebirth of things, if it weren't for the Byzantine Empire keeping the old textbooks and learning and knowledge alive. So it's a pretty important bridge between the ancient world and the modern world, the Byzantine Empire. Okay, so they built I said Catholic. My apologies, that's terrible. They built Christian churches all over their empire. Well, wait a minute. Didn't they only exist in the eastern half? Well, that's the other fact, right, about the meaning, and then we'll just briefly talk about the church and do a quick formal analysis before we take the break. No, they didn't stay in their neck of the woods, however you want to write that. They didn't stay in the Eastern Mediterranean, which is the Middle East, Greece, and Turkey. And that's it. That's where they started, but they expanded. So here's how to write it in one line. After the fall of Rome, you could say in the 500s, that's when this church was built. In the 6th century, right, that's what that is. Say it either way, the 6th century or the 500s. The Byzantine Empire reconquered 2/3 of the old Roman Empire, the entire Mediterranean, almost the entire coastline of the Mediterranean, all the way around to Spain and all the way across North Africa, including Egypt. It's a major empire. It wasn't quite as big as the Roman Empire. They didn't go north into France and England and Germany, but they conquered 2/3 of the old Roman Empire. Just keep it simple. That's a major achievement in one lifetime. We'll talk about who that guy was after the break, because we have 2 slides relating to who was the emperor that did that. But just say for now, the Byzantine Empire achieved that. They reconquered 2/3 of the Roman Empire, and they reintroduced Christianity, because those places had gone to barbarianism, and the barbarians who invaded Rome were not Christian, but they were reconverted to Christianity by the Byzantines' reconquest, one area of which is Italy, and that's why this church is a Byzantine church. Okay, and then it's Greek Orthodox. I already described that to you, so I don't need to repeat that. It has those features. It's on your syllabus, right? Which is the Greek cross floor plan. That's part of the meaning of this, right? Apses, and then, hang on. Yeah, this happens sometimes. Just the battery needs to be reconnected. It takes less than 10 seconds. There we go. Okay, so to finish up on the meaning, this has those 3 features. I held up that, so you should all have that drawing I did. And the dome rests, and that is a dome, on the corners of the walls. Now, an apse is an actual definition, and it's short, so I'll give it to you now. It's part of what might appear on the true-false section or the fill-in section of the final. Okay, here it is. Apse, it's on your list of terms to know. An apse is a semicircular extension along the outer walls of a church, which helps support those walls. Again, a semicircular extension along the outer walls of a church, which helps support those walls. So here are the apses. There's one there and one there. You can see them in this picture. And then we see the dome, which it's hard to tell, but it's resting on the corners. And then if you were to look at the original walls of the church, or a blueprint, drawing of it by the architect, there had to be an architect, right, for this building before it was built, you'd see it was shaped, the outer walls were shaped like a Greek cross. So that's pretty much the whole meaning. It's symbolic of the expansion of the Byzantine Empire and the reintroduction of Christianity into Western Europe and North Africa. And then it was all replaced. We'll cover it next week. I think you'll find really interesting the slides of Muslim or Islamic, I prefer to say Islamic art, some of the greatest art of the Middle Ages, frankly, when it was the Dark Ages in Europe, was not happening in Europe. It was in, of course, the Arab world. And we'll talk all about that next week. Okay, wrapping it up and then take our break. It was balanced. It may not look like it from this slide, but if you walk around the other side, you'd see the expansion. The walls were expanded, by the way, maybe 50 or 100 years later. But the original shape was the shape of a cross, and the expanded walls are symmetrical. So just right that it's balanced left to right, but weighted toward the bottom because obviously the dome is not as wide as the outer walls. It is about a 60-foot high dome above a cross-shaped, or to be exact, Greek cross-shaped, open floor plan. It's an open floor plan inside. There are no divided rooms, as most Greek Orthodox churches and Russian Orthodox churches are, if you've ever been inside one. So it's an open floor plan shaped like a Greek cross with a 60-foot high dome. That's the actual space. The rhythm is obvious. The windows, these pilasters, you could say columns, but they're not really because they're not round. So the right word is pilasters. You could just say pillars. That creates rhythm, as do the crosses at the top here, of course. And the apses, semicircular. One's taller than the other, but they're both semicircular. So there's a lot of rhythm. It is dynamic on the apses and the windows, stable on the walls, of course. And then we have the largest mass is the outer walls, then the dome, and then the apses, in that order. There's no modeling except the shadows from the sun. There is visual line around the edges of the windows, no carved line. And it's a warm color. The walls are brick, which is always a warm color, yellowish brown color here. And the tile on the roof is red clay tile, so that's obviously warm. And the texture is the real smooth texture of tile and glass in the windows, tile on the roof, and rough brick on the walls. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and take our break, 20-minute break. All right. And if you have questions, you can ask them verbally, or you can give me the raised hands icon if you're doing it with chats, that I'll try to answer if there are not too many before we start the second half. And we're going to end fairly early tonight, but we have at least two more, one of which I'm guaranteeing will be on. I won't say which one of the four remaining ones. So don't take off too early, but you'll get to finish up early tonight, I promise. Okay. Okay, let's resume in a minute, but I did want to make one more announcement that I didn't think to add or include, I should say, in my comments at the beginning of tonight's class about grading and the midterm. As some of you may have noticed, I think from both classes, at least 2 or 3 people in each of the 2 sections of our 2.1 I teach, where the midterm was posted right before midnight on Thursday, and the deadline I had given everybody, if you recall, right, was for it to be submitted no later than midnight, like 11:59 p.m. on Friday, meaning before Saturday. But several people actually turned them in as late as late Saturday evening, just before midnight, like 24 hours after the initial deadline. Okay, if you're one of those people, don't panic. I'm not going to not accept it, even though there are teachers that might say that, hey, that's past the deadline. Everyone had 48 hours, the day of the test, or at least close to that. And then those, anyone from either class, of course, you all had equal opportunity, could spend actually 24 more hours looking it up on YouTube. Or if you missed it, then you could take it then. No one among those who turned it in, 8, 10, 12, 24 hours later, had contacted me to say that they were, evacuated or otherwise in a medical emergency of some kind. That allows a student, it's not my rules, this is the district rules, right? I've said this several times. If you have written evidence of that, then you get an extension, of whatever days or weeks it was you were out of circulation during the test or during the deadline of a paper to submit it. No one stated that, so all I can think of, and I've already consulted with a couple other teachers and the art department on this, I will accept those tests and grade them like the others that were turned in a day or so late. But I will take just in a few, I just mean a handful of points off for being late. Otherwise, it's not fair to those who took the time to either take the test in the real time or at least check in on the YouTube and turn it in by the deadline, because deadlines have to mean something. So it's not going to affect too many. I mean, if you got like 97 and you had a few points off, you could still have an A minus at least. And that can be made up anytime you had, anything less than 100% on any assignment. You all know you can make that up easily with the, I've already stated what we state them. I'll send an email summarizing, and probably on Thursday or Friday. The extra credit options are easy way to make up any points you might have off for a late paper, or if you took the exam late. But you'll still get it graded, you still get credit, and it won't make a huge difference. But I have to have some way of adjusting the difference between those who turned them in before the deadline and those who waited an extra day. Okay, I meant to say that at the beginning of this evening. All right, so let's see if the sharing is still working. I hope it is. Let's see, this should be, don't want to do full screen, gallery view. Well, I don't know why it just suddenly went to this partial image. Okay, there we are, full image. Let's do this. Okay, we finished with that one. You should have the notes from that. And then on this slide, let me just check, because whoever can unmute themselves and make sure you can see it.
The slides aren't up. It's just, did you screen share?
Oh, yeah, I had it on screen share. I thought it would stay. Thank you. That is the reason I needed to get your input here. So, why does that? So what do we do? Wait a minute. Not that kind of share. Otherwise it goes into a different. Just give me a moment. Restore down. Okay. Let's get the full screen, because that should allow sharing. Here we go. Let's try share screen again. Thank you. I appreciate you guys keeping me on my toes. Let's hope that this works like it's supposed to, and we'll know in a minute. And then maximize it back up.
The image is showing.
Okay, thank you all. That's good news. All right, let's resume. We're going to end early. We're going to end around 9. Oh, maybe even 9:15, 9:30. I'm sure no one will object, but I will stick around a good 5-10 minutes, or however long it takes to answer any questions you have, either via chat, with the raised hand thing, or verbally. Okay, so this is the next must know. Sant, and that's yet another way in Italian of saying saint. S-A-N-T. It's 2 words. Apollinaire. A-P-O-L-L-I-N-A-R-E. I think in Italian they would say Apollinare. A-P, like Apollo, only without the second O. So I'll spell it again. Sant, S-A-N-T, and then second word. A-P-O-L-L-I-N-A-R-E. Sant Apollinare, the name of the saint the church is named for, of course. Ravenna, same city. In fact, very near to the one we saw right before the break. Ravenna. I've never been there. It's a part of Italy I've just never gotten to. I think it's central Italy. R-A-V-E-N-N-A. 547. So these 2 churches were built the same year. The one we just saw before the break, which you should already have the notes, of course, from San Vitale, and this one. So that would tend to indicate, if it's not obvious, it is an example of the Byzantine Empire expanding across the Mediterranean. Or you can say to include 2/3 of the old Roman, or reconquer is really what they did. Reconquer 2/3 of the old Roman Empire, including all of Italy. They ruled it for quite a while. The Muslims never took over Italy. They did take over Sicily, which is now part of Italy, as you know. It's the football being kicked by the heel of the toe, of the boot of Italy, if you know what I mean when you look at a map. So only Sicily was taken, away from the Byzantines during the early Middle Ages by the invasion of Arabic and Islamic armies. The rest of Italy remained Christian and was influenced by this architecture and this invasion. It was an invasion from the Eastern Mediterranean. That was the Byzantines reconquering Italy, not only reintroduced Christianity, which had never disappeared, but it, kind of was not the dominant religion for a while in the early Dark Ages when the barbarians took over and destroyed most of what was left of the Roman culture. And then the Byzantines reintroduced it, only with the twist of being Eastern Orthodox, or Greek. The right word is Greek Orthodox. So this is a Byzantine church, and it's a synonymous term. You can say either. The two words mean the same thing. Greek Orthodox in terms of religious denomination or category. So what do we see here? Well, I think we can get up close and see, look, there's Jesus as a shepherd leading sheep, supposedly telling them how if they follow his teachings, they can go to heaven. And there's a giant cross symbolizing heaven. But some people may notice, I have, and I've never heard an explanation. Why is this cross like a Catholic cross, right? It's the kind with the extra long stem, or, vertical arm. I don't know, because Byzantine churches sometimes had longer crosses, but the majority of Byzantine churches, the shape of the walls, I already said this before the break, A and B, the actual crosses depicted either inside or on top of the domes and towers outside were of the, equal arm shape. But this is one that's different. It's original, though. It's Byzantine. The Byzantines came here. They conquered Italy. They came here and they formed a whole sort of second capital way, way far away from Rome. It was a couple hundred miles from Rome. So anyway, this is what the interior looks like. So what are these decorations? There must be paintings, right? No, they're not frescoes. They are mosaics. And this is your next definition. This is a very short definition, luckily, mercifully short for this late at night. A mosaic, you see it on the list of terms to know. So I shouldn't need to spell it, right? Mosaics are a mosaic, any individual mosaic, is a two-dimensional work of art made up of thousands of tiny pieces of colored glass, period. I'll say it again. A two-dimensional work of art made up of thousands of tiny pieces of colored glass. Of course, they're inserted into wet plaster, probably, I would think. What else would it be on the wall? This is a mosaic, and it's a very ornate one. Look, it's even, it's got like, the Garden of Eden almost looking like, tropical plants here, and animals that look like they could come from the Middle East. And then there's Jesus and his followers, symbolized by the sheep, and he's preaching to them. And then there's heaven above them, right? It's a very rich, detailed mosaic, teaching various aspects, or symbolizing various aspects of the Christian religion, specifically the Eastern Orthodox version of it inside this church. And you see, this is an apse. I don't know if you can tell, this is not the dome. There's a much bigger mosaic on the dome, but I don't have a slide of that. Like I say, I've never been to this town. This is what was in the slide library and what's in, I think, the textbooks file that they said, every textbook publisher has slides that they allow you to. So what are we looking at here? We are looking at, let's get it back down to the small version, the open floor plan I told you about. So we'll finish the meaning and then do a quick form analysis, and we'll go to two of the remaining three are so important, I said before the break, that they absolutely have a high possibility, and at least one of those next two will be on the final. Okay, so what do we see here? We see a Greek cross floor plan, or one arm of a Greek cross ending in an apse. You see how it projects out there, right? And we see mosaics, and the Byzantines, this is a fact I should have mentioned earlier, were the greatest mosaic artists of the ancient world. Everyone agrees with that. They developed the art of mosaic, wall decorations. What else are they? To the highest level of any culture. They were the greatest mosaic artists in the ancient world, among many other things they were great at, but that's one in visual arts that they were exceedingly skilled at. And you'll see the evidence of that when we get to one of the next Byzantine slides. And then next week, I forgot to tell you this, I've decided to wait till next week, because next week we have only 6 months now, let me check, on Islamic art. but I also have my own slides of Istanbul. And Istanbul is, of course, I think I said this, the only city on earth that spans 2 continents. I mean, it's unique and one of the most beautiful places on earth. I've never seen a more fascinating city. I mean, Rome is equally interesting, but this is what we'll do. We will see the slides from the Islamic, list of slides from the syllabus, and then we'll segue right into my own slides, and we'll either do a long session without a break and end early that way, or we'll, depends on how things go, we may do, just like tonight, an early break and still end early next week. But I really would urge you to stay to see those slides. Of course, you have to take notes. My own slide, just like the last 20 minutes, like we've done before, of the city of Istanbul, of the ancient buildings the Byzantines left, one of which we're going to see tonight. But I'll show you what it looks like inside with my own slides. Hagia Sophia, the largest dome building ever built in the ancient world, still standing in Istanbul. So that'll be the last part of next week. Okay, let's wrap this up. So this has an apse, it has a Greek cross floor plan, and the dome, such as it is, which you can't see here, but just know there is a dome up above where the photo ends, is resting on the corners, or Pendantes, as you know from my drawing, and of course it's on the list of terms to know. Okay, that's it for the meaning. Formal analysis. Balanced? Yeah, clearly balanced. To me, I don't think there's a question. It depends on where you draw the line, but halfway down this wall, the apse, it's balanced. Left to right and top to bottom. Then we have the rhythm, of course, of the decorative details, like the sheep here and the plants and trees on the wall. There are more sheep, see here, climbing up to heaven to meet Jesus. There he is in heaven after he died. Let's take a closer look at that. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I forgot you could see that from this angle. Okay, and then we have color. Well, it's all over the place. The walls themselves are cool, kind of off-white or really gray. I would say more of a grayish white marble. That's clearly cool. But there are warm colors in the mosaics, right? On some of the plants, the cross, the outline at least of it. Jesus's robes, part of which are red. And up in heaven, the saints, these are all saints, right? In their heavenly scenes, or settings, I should say. They have a kind of a warm color, gold or reds, and so there's both. And then the background's blue, on almost blue or bluish green. So it's a mixture. And of course the sheep are white, so compared to the warm colors that contrast them as cool colors. So it's both. There is painted line here. Mosaics, remember, are painted glass. So there's painted line. And then visual line around the arches. The rhythm is obvious. Well, I already mentioned that. Is it dynamic? Yes, the apse is, and the arches and the windows. So the arches on the colonnades, the rows of columns are colonnades. The columns themselves and the outer walls themselves, of course, the actual walls are stable, so it's both. For space, it's about also a 60-foot high dome in an open Greek cross, you could just say cross-shaped floor plan. Again, these kinds of churches don't usually divide up into smaller rooms inside. Now, the ones in Russia I saw did. St. Basil's in Moscow, there's a lot of little rooms in that building, but that's not typical of Russian or Greek Orthodox churches. Okay, here the shadows create from the sunlight create the modeling. And I don't know if the largest mass in this view, it's probably the apse. And then the wall above it, and then, oh no, actually I would say the side walls, yeah. And then the wall above the apse, and if you went to a fourth mass, it'd be the columns. Okay, balance, rhythm, stability. Oh, textures. These are the real textures of smooth glass, both on the mosaic, of course, is glass, the windows, and smooth marble on the walls. Okay. Now, I often change the titles when I've had the time and or presence of mind to think ahead and say, this syllabus is for a class I haven't taught in 2 years. I've taught it many, many times, but it's before the, conversion to distance learning. So I didn't somehow remember to change the title of this next slide. But I'm going to do this to give you guys a break. Well, at least it's an alternative that's easier. The title that Stockstead has is the one on the syllabus. So you can use that title. or you can use the shorter one that I and most historians have currently used. So I'll give you first the official title from the syllabus that's in Stockstead. Emperor Justinian and his attendants. That doesn't mean how many days he went to church or school. It's the people in it, the picture. So it's Emperor, is of course Emperor, Justinian, that's his name. The guy in the middle, obviously, Justianian, and his attendants. That's of course the noun attendants, Attendants. Ravenna, same city. In fact, it's inside that church we just saw, San Vitale. It's on another wall in Ravenna. And of course, it has two ends. And so therefore, it's the same year, 547. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a mosaic of the Emperor Justinian, but the title that Stockstead gives us is A, long and cumbersome, unnecessarily so, and B, not quite accurate. Attendants would be people who wait on you, wouldn't they? Servants, right? I mean, that's what the meaning of the word is everywhere I've ever seen it. These ain't that. These are not his attendants. These are his advisors. This is the ruling circle, the inner circle, some people would call it, of the entire Byzantine Empire, all in one picture. These are not attendants. So just Emperor Justinian Mosaic will do. If you prefer to write that, and that's the answer you give, not saying it will be, but has a high possibility. I didn't say that, I'll say it now before we get to the meaning. This is one of those last two I said I would tell you after the break. That is too important to cut from the study list. It has a high possibility of being this and or what, not both. One of these, this or the next one, will be on the final. Okay, so very important. Well, I'll explain. But I just would, if you want to keep it simple, make the title the shorter version, and it's more accurate. The Emperor Justinian Mosaic. Okay, so he's the guy in the middle. If it's not obvious, look at his crown. Let's get up close. And his halo. That indicates that he is both a secular and religious ruler. He has the dual responsibility, you could say, or power. Probably power is a better word. He has dual powers over the government. He's the head of the whole Byzantine Empire. He's the head honcho. He's the guy. He's the emperor, of course, of the government. But he's also the head of the Byzantine Church, which by this time had tens of millions of people at least under its influence. So that's why he has both a crown and a halo. That makes him a sacred image, or sacred figure, I should say. It's an image of him. So this is an image of a sacred figure. The emperor was considered sacred, not a god on earth like the pharaohs, not quite that way, but on the equivalent of a pope, right? I mean, no, at least I don't know anybody who, I was raised Catholic, by the way, so I could, definitely say, I don't remember ever hearing in church or from the nuns in Sunday school that the Pope was a god on earth. No, but he's definitely considered more important than most to Catholics, other members of the Catholic Church. So the same is true here. So just say it's equivalent of like he was the head of the Byzantine Church for sure, and that makes him the equivalent of somewhat like a Pope. You could just say it that way. But he also was the emperor. And who are these people? These are his advisors. You could say his cabinet, right? His circle of advisors who help him run the government. This guy, though, is the most important one, some would say. Let's go back to the main view, because see, there's your Greek cross. Not obvious. See, it's an equal arm cross. This guy, to the bald guy to the immediate left of Justinian, is the actual metropolitan. Now you'll say, oh, what? Unless you have an Eastern Orthodox heritage or have family and friends who are. In Eastern Orthodox churches, Russian, Greek, Ukrainian, whatever, their version of a pope is sometimes, there's more than one word for him, but the easiest word to spell and remember is metropolitan. He's like the actual, and then you might say, wait, didn't I just say Justinian was? Well, that's the only way to explain that dichotomy is Justinian was the emperor of an empire of probably over 100 million people. In any case, just very large, over 3 continents. He was a little busy with politics and government and daily. law enforcement and all the things that go with being an emperor. So he turned over the day-to-day running of the Byzantine Church to the guy to his left. So you could say he's like second in command of the Byzantine Church. And his title was Metropolitan. The word metropolitan has nothing to do with what we think of today. Hey, you're so metropolitan. Well, I don't know if people say it that way anymore. Meaning, with it, whatever, urban, sophisticated. Does nothing like that. In the past, the word originally implied that you were in charge of at least some portion of the Byzantine religion in your region, your district, your province. Well, this guy was second in charge of the entire Byzantine Church. That's why he's one of the advisors standing next to Justinian. And then who are these guys with the shields and the spears? These are his military advisors. These guys would be like the joint chiefs of staff. Some of you know that term, right? If you don't, then you could just say, well, like his military. The heads of his, remember, they didn't just have armies, they had navies, they had cavalry, and they had artillery. Yeah, they had artillery. It just didn't use gunpowder. Of course, they had flaming, buckets of oil that they shot at enemy cities when they were besieged. They had a form of artillery. Giant crossbows that could, penetrate a heavy wooden gate. They had artillery in essence, and it was a separate branch of the military. So these are, just say it this way, you don't have to write all the details. But these guys here on our left were the heads of the different branches of the Byzantine military. They were the ones who did the actual conquering of the 2/3 of the old Roman Empire on the orders of this guy. So let's talk about him a little more to say why this is so important. It's just an image of a bunch of dead old guys from the ancient world. Who cares? Except for the fact that it's in the syllabus. Well, actually, his legacy is still with us today. Justinian created three things that the modern so-called urban civilizations around the world, not just the Western world, but all over the world, still depend on to this day. Don't say all of them, that's too strong, but just say many of the urban civilizations throughout, or developed, if you prefer that word, whichever you prefer, would have owed or do owe a debt of gratitude, or at least just a debt, cultural debt to the Byzantine Empire and to him personally, because he created three things that we still have today. What are those three things? It's the last part of the meaning. His personal legacy, besides reconquering 2/3 of the Roman Empire and reintroducing Christianity to North Africa and Western Europe, pretty major achievement right there. He also invented, okay, now you're going to say, what? The concept of modern bureaucracy. Oh, isn't that a negative? Well, wait a minute. Try to run any complex urban civilization without government bureaucracy. No matter what political perspective a person has, you can't deny it's necessary. So he created a postal system that worked brilliantly. It's part of the bureaucracy. He created the court system of appeal courts that we take for granted, all the way up to a Supreme Court. They had their versions of those different levels that you hear about, the different governments appealing, like Obamacare, whether or not it's going to get repealed, without getting it all partisan. You know what I'm talking about. I'm just saying, we have a multi-tiered court system. He's the first one to make that a requirement of enforcing the laws throughout the Byzantine Empire. So he created the multi-tiered, or appellate, you could say, if you want to, court system that we just take for granted today. Right. And then he had his third achievement was the Justinian Code of Laws. This was the first time in Western, you got to say Western history. The Chinese were doing it too. So it's not, in the whole world, but in the Western world, this was the first ruler to codify the laws throughout the entire empire and allow slight variations in each province, which then, of course, were adjudicated by the judges in those courts that we just talked about. You might think the Romans did that. No, Romans were a top-down society that didn't really have, they had a form of bureaucracy, if you want to call it that, but it was all pretty much nepotism, right, and favoritism and bribery and corruption. He tried to make sure people were qualified. They actually had a civil service exam Of course, the Chinese have been doing that for a while, but in the Western world, no one else had done that before. You're supposed to be trained in the job that you're hired to do at the local or regional level. So we have a lot of current institutions that, whether like them or not, they're part of everyday life, that started with this guy right here. Pretty important person, and most historians consider him one of the 100 most important people in the history of the world for those reasons. And you probably never heard of him right before that. Okay, so that's plenty on the meaning, except for one other thing. Don't write this. Look at these four guys here. A few of you may have noticed. Look at their faces. They look a little bit like a certain famous singing group from England from the 1960s. I didn't come up with that. One of my students, he was your fire chief many decades ago, about 20 years ago, it's John, Paul, George, and Ringo from the White Album circa 1960. It's a bizarre coincidence of history. No one knows why they ended up looking, these four guys from 1,500 years ago, ended up looking a lot like a certain 20th century English singing group. Anyway, that's not something you need to remember or write, but it's an odd coincidence of history. Happens every so often. All right, formal analysis. I already told you about the Byzantines. It's part of the meaning. You could add if you want. They were the greatest mosaic artists in the ancient world. So it's classically Byzantine. We're doing the formal analysis in that it has a gold, therefore obviously warm background. All Byzantine mosaics had a gold background. Also, they usually had at least one sacred figure or image, and that's here is Justinian with his halo. The halo tells you who's the saint-like or sacred person, and that's him in this one. And then they had stiff formal poses. It's true they weren't lifelike poses, but the detailing and everything we're doing now, the formal analysis, of course, the simulated texture was superb, the best of any mosaic artists in the ancient world. On the robes, on the hair, and the mustache. George's here, and Paul's there. Those are all very accurate detailing, down to the even the the details of the encrusted jewels on this guy's shield. Not sure which he is, head of the army or the navy, whatever. One of the joint chiefs there. So all the detailing is superbly sharp and realistic, and it's bold outline. That's typical Byzantine mosaics. Everything is bold outline around, pretty much, except their faces, of course. The rhythm is obvious. The heads, arms, hands, legs. It's entirely stable. There's hardly anything dynamic. Of course, the tops of their heads. So the only dynamic details are two: the shield of one of these generals, we'll say, or admirals, it's hard to say, one of these military men, and of course the crown / halo. It's kind of combined into one of the emperor, but everything else almost entirely stable. And then we have the cool colors of the white robes. And this is kind of purple, so that would qualify as cool as well, but warm on at least some of the military leaders, or just say military leaders, parts of their clothing. And the background is warm, so it's a mixture. Let's see, mass, well, the largest mass is him. He's meant to be. He's in the middle, and it shows his entire width. And he was fairly tall, too, by the way. I think he was over 6'2". And so there's no larger or smaller masses beyond him, I don't think. But I guess you could say that the Metropolitan is, yeah, he is slightly larger than these other guys on either side. So those are the two largest masses, and then the other figures are about the same. For space, you just have overlapping. That's the only technique. That's it. And it's completely balanced, left to right and top to bottom. Okay, moving on. Let's see. This one is not the last of the really super important ones that has a high possibility of being on the final, but it's still one you need to take notes because I haven't decided whether or not I might cut it. It's on the syllabus at the bottom. Icon of Virgin and Christ. Icon, I-C-O-N, of course, we still use that word today with computers. Of Virgin and Christ. Virgin, I think you probably know how to spell, but V-I-R-G-I-N, with a capital V, and Christ. That's the title. The location is Istanbul. That's the city it would be now. Originally, when it was created, it was Constantinople. We always give you the location of what it's called today, the name of it. I think some of you already know, but I'll spell that for you. I-S-T-A-N-B-U-L, Istanbul. And this is circa 12th century. So if you just want to write circa 1200s, that's fine. That actually is, no, not 1200s. Sorry, I misspoke. Uh-oh. I'm giving myself a slap on the wrist. 12th century would be 1100s, but it's confusing, I know. So just circa 1200 will do. That would be the last year. Now, here's a quick aside. I know some of you will say, oh, please, I've already heard this, but if you haven't, you should know this. And some people haven't. A lot of my students tell me this over the years, that the 20th century did not begin in 2000. That was the 21st century. I misspoke twice today. That's terrible. It began in 2001. The last year of the 20th century was 2000. Despite Prince's song, Let's Party Like It's 1999. He was a little early with that one. Anyway, the point is that the last year of a century is the one that ends in zeros. So you can just say circa little c, or just even 1200 without using the little c. Okay, because that's the end of the century. We know it was created that century. Okay, so sometime in the 1100s up until 1200, but we don't know what year. So just say circa or about 1200. What is an icon? Oh, this is an easy definition. Again, we're down to, it's the last new definition for tonight. An icon is a sacred image in Christian art. It doesn't have to be only Byzantine. They created the idea, but you don't have to write it that way. You can just say, I'll start again, say it over. An icon is a sacred image in Christian art with one or more of the following figures, or you can say including one or more of the following figures: Jesus, Mary, both are in this one, right? Mother and child. Jesus, Mary, God, and other saints or holy figures. So this is an icon. See, here are two saints up in heaven with their halos. That's how we know they're saints. Looking down, while Mary, mother of Jesus, and Jesus on her lap are sitting on, what are they sitting on? That should get your curiosity. Well, doesn't it look familiar? We've seen slides at the end of the midterm. This last slide I used. Let's get a closer look. It's obviously patterned after the Colosseum in Rome. Well, they had one in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. In the Byzantine Empire, they had arenas, amphitheaters, but they didn't have sacrificial games. They didn't have blood sports. And they certainly didn't sacrifice Christians to the lions. That wouldn't make much sense. So they stopped the blood sports, you could say. But they had other entertainments. They had combat, they had boxing. They had athletic contests, maybe mock naval battles where no one died. And they certainly had all kinds of feats of strength, and like the Scottish games. Have you ever, any of you been? They used to be in Santa Rosa. Now I think they're way out in Livermore, where they try to do feats of strength to show off and compete. So they had arenas shaped and designed just like the Colosseum in Rome, only they didn't kill people inside them. So that's what she's sitting on, a throne shaped like a Colosseum, but one would have been built by the Byzantines. Okay, and then we have this fact is the last thing I want to say about the meaning. Of course, Mary, if it's obvious, is the virgin. Supposedly she gave birth to Jesus without that nasty business of sex, according to the Bible. So that's why they call her the virgin. So that means Mary, mother of Jesus. But look at Jesus here. I don't know about the rest of you, but to me, he looks like a miniature 30-year-old man with a very bad haircut. That is an awful image. It doesn't look like a child, a toddler. And the skill, the point I'm making, this is the serious point you should write, that this is an indication of the lower level or declining of the skill of painters in the late Middle Ages. With the mosaic we saw from 600 years earlier of Justinian, it's pretty realistic, all those details. But look what's happened 6 centuries later. This is near the end of the Byzantine Empire. And so the artists were losing their skills in depicting realistic detail, let alone proportions. Obviously, Mary was never that big, and Jesus, neither was he. So it's just kind of an indication of the declining skills of artists as the Middle Ages wore on, and particularly late in the Byzantine Empire, that was true, just like it was late in the Roman Empire, right? Okay, formal analysis. balanced. Oh yeah, this is extremely well balanced with her in the middle. But some people think because Jesus's body is large enough that it might throw it off. But if you draw a line this way, I saw it's roughly balanced. And the throne, quote unquote, or arena / Colosseum that they're sitting on, that's totally symmetrical. And then you've got two equal sized saints floating up above them, looking down. Oh, there is one more fact about the meaning. You don't have to add this, but I think if we go back up to that image, you notice the skin tones look dead. This sort of decayed flesh, like sickly greenish gray color. That's not what the original artists probably intended, certainly not what they intended. And they may not have looked that way originally. So there's two theories why the skin tones on some late medieval icons look so much like dead flesh, or unlifelike, you could say, or decayed skin, however you want to write that. If you want to add this as the last fact about the meaning, which you don't have to, you have enough. But if you were adding it, because it's easy to remember, it's right in front of your face, were this to be on final. There's two possible explanations. One is that time decayed the colors. The original colors were brighter, more lifelike, and they just diminished over time. A more likely explanation is the chemical impurities in the paints they had to work with back then. They didn't have oil paint, which is much more bright and vivid and lifelike in, creating colors, more realistic colors. So they had earlier forms of, you have to know, tempera, egg-based paint. You can just say the paints were less realistic in terms of the colors, and the chemical composition in them often made the skin tones look green. Okay, let's wrap up the formal analysis, and then the next slide is really important one, the last one. I think it is the last one for now, right? Let's see. Yeah, it is. It went early, but there's more than 5 minutes worth to say on it, and it's one of the two that it would definitely, that I've already said will be for sure one of the previous one before this, of the Mosaic of Emperor Justinian, or the very last one, Hagia Sophia. One of those two will definitely be on the final. Okay, so to wrap this up, I already said it's balanced. There's the rhythm, of course, the human bodies, the heads, arms, hands, the robes, folds of the robes create rhythm, as does the throne / Colosseum they're sitting on. And then we have cool, right, on her under garment here, and warm red on the outer robes. And warm, as all Byzantine icons, this is an icon, so of course has a gold background, as all Byzantine icons did. That's warm, as are the halos on all four figures. Is her halo, his halo, and the two saints. And then the actual throne / arena is also warm. There is modeling, pretty realistic and sharp modeling on the robes, somewhat softer but still realistic on their faces. And the simulated textures, not realistic on the clothing or the arena, but on the, even though they don't look like very lifelike and realistic images of a living mother and baby or toddler, because of the inaccurate depictions of their appearances. Nonetheless, the simulated textures are realistic on their skin, and at least on his hair. You can't see hers. So there's some simulated texture, realistic simulated texture, though most of it is not very realistic on the clothing and the background. A bold outline is typical of all mosaics, Byzantine mosaics. And then we have the stable. Yep, they're both stable and upright, except the top of their heads and, well, the halos. But the throne they're sitting on is, well, stable in the front and dynamic in the back, but it's still mostly stable, the majority of the figures. And the largest mass, it's pretty easy, it's her. Then I guess you could say the throne, because you see not, well, yeah, she's bigger than that, or arena, and then him, maybe the third largest. Okay. Oh, for space, sorry, didn't say, there's only overlapping. I don't see foreshortening here, because look, this doesn't, you see how poorly it is done here again on the background, as was the case with late Byzantine and late Roman art, as we covered. All right, now we get to a really important slide, but I'm going to go ahead to this view because I just got this last semester from the slide library, and I really appreciated she found this somewhere. Wasn't even in the slide library. See how much more realistic, warm the colors are. Okay, we're looking at something that is one of the world's most important sites. And whether you know it or not, it's influential in modern filmmaking. Yeah, I'll explain that in a few minutes. Okay, so this is the last must know, has about a 50-50 chance of being along with the Justinian mosaic on the final. Hagia Sophia, or as my aunt in Indiana, what is it, Hagia? And that's, of course, in Greek. They spoke Greek, by the way, if you're curious. They didn't speak Latin in the Byzantine Empire. They spoke Greek. Hagia, the first word, which means highest or saint. Sophia, like the name Sophia. So many people have that first name now. Sophia. The architects, which if you said Istanbul, because it's currently in what's the city of Istanbul, you wouldn't get credit for this part of your answer. Remember, whatever's on the syllabus, we have the names of the architects. Artemis, Artemis, and Isidorus, Isodorus. Artemis and Isidorus, 537. Wow, it's hard to know where to start with this. Let's start with the fact that this building was the largest dome building ever built, not just to survive, but ever built in the whole ancient world. I'll say it again. This was the largest dome building ever built in the ancient world. How large was it? Well, bigger than the Pantheon, which was the second largest dome building ever built, the largest Roman dome. This is bigger. 182 feet tall, the dome, by 180 feet wide. That's about 40 feet taller and wider than the dome we saw right at the end of the Roman sites, the Pantheon. You could fit an 18-story skyscraper inside this building. That's give you some perspective. It's just mind-boggling, breathtaking to stand there and look up at it. You can't even see it because no one photo can capture the entire height of the walls and the dome. That's the bottom of the dome, right? Okay, then we have the fact that it's a Greek Orthodox or Byzantine, the right word. Well, you can say it either way. Remember, they're synonymous. Byzantine, therefore Greek Orthodox style church. Well, yeah, it's got the four arms of the cross. And here you can see one of them, right? We're standing in one of them. If you were to walk back behind the back of the photographer, the way the photo was taken, behind the photographer, the opposite of the direction he was facing in, would be one of the other arms, and then to the left and right. In other words, exactly the shape of a Greek cross. Huge. Each arm of the cross is all part of the meaning, is a city block long. You can see from this picture what I'm talking about. They can incorporate inside the building, and it was hypothetically, you could have 4 city blocks inside this building. Okay, then you have the apses, which of course you can tell this is a double apse or a combined large or main apse or major apse, right? Supported by 3 smaller ones. It's such a heavy dome and such a big building that they needed not just one apse on each side or each end of the cross, but they needed a combination of one large apse supported by 3 smaller ones. So apses. But the dome on Pendantes is the most amazing thing. That's what a pendentive is. You see, it's really the corner, but it isn't that corner, like a right angle, sharp corner inside a building with straight right angle walls. No, it's a piece of concrete which bridges the corner itself. So that's the right word for it. You have it from your notes now. You should have, because I held it up with that diagram and it's on your list of terms. Pendentives, which is these reinforced corners. So the dome is supported by these, and that dome, 182 feet tall, 180 feet wide, is immense, and it's solid concrete, and it's had to be repaired after 2 earthquakes, but didn't collapse. I read in a book somewhere where, half of it collapsed. There were eyewitnesses, plenty of eyewitnesses. That happened in the late Middle Ages, I think during the Crusades, and then there was a no more recent earthquake that left a crack. But it is the original dome. It just needed some repairs from earthquakes. That's not about the construction. It was built to last. It's the original 1,500-year-old dome. which of course they could never have made that big if they hadn't invented, the Byzantine architects, this technique of supporting the dome on reinforced, you can just say reinforced corners called Pendantes. And then, if that's not enough to give you an idea of how massive this building is, these are old Roman columns from ruined Roman temples, 40 feet high. Look how they're dwarfed by the building around them. And these are from other smaller temples, 20 feet high. They took them from ruined Roman buildings, which were, of course, all around this area, Greece and Turkey, when the Romans ruled it. And they, reclaimed them and put them up, re-erected them here. These are 40 feet and these are 20. I'll repeat that when we do the formal analysis. And then finally, this is a part of the meaning some of you may know. Well, there's two more facts. These shields have Arabic prayers, Islamic prayers in Arabic. Why? Because the Turks conquered the Byzantine Empire. It took them hundreds of years, but they finally took over the city of Constantinople. Now, you should write that, because otherwise it wouldn't be clear. If you were writing the answer on an essay question about this slide on the final, you'd want to explain that why are these shields here with Islamic prayers? Because the Turks were, of course, Muslim, had been for centuries, overthrew the Byzantine Empire, occupied their capital, Constantinople, and converted this into a mosque. Well, guess what? What goes around comes around. History repeats itself, however you want to say. It's been in the news. If you haven't heard it, it'd be extra credit to look it up and print it out. Not print out. Sorry, we don't meet in person. To forward to me as an attachment an article about this. It was just like last month. Most of the world did not agree, but the Turkish government converted it back into a mosque. It had been for a whole century a museum open to everyone, which is what it ought to be, because it was built as a Christian church. Then it was a mosque. Then for a while it was both during the Renaissance. And then it was neither. It was just sort of an open, air market or something. I think it was actually used. It was used for all kinds of things. And then for a whole century, the modern government of Turkey, that is not supposed to be, enforcing any religion, has converted it, the current government, after being under Turkish rule, as a museum for nearly, it wasn't quite, it was almost like 1920 something, nearly a century, as a museum open to the world. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site if there ever was one. It's now closed off to anyone who's not officially worshiping during Muslim religious ceremonies. I think they'll they'll allow guided tours. They'd lose a lot of tourism if they didn't. Once the pandemic's over, they're going to want more tourists. This is one of the most highly visited sites on the planet Earth. Millions of people a year went through it. And now I'm sure that's going to go way down, besides the pandemic. Because it's been converted into a functioning mosque. That's just a fact. Make of that what you will. But that's a recent fact about it that I wouldn't have been able to say it wasn't true even last semester. And then the final fact I told you was one more. This might be the most mind-boggling, to me it is, of all the superlatives you could heap on this structure, which is it took from start to finish. Justinian ordered it to be built. He hired the architects, he supervised, so you got to give him credit for creating it, in essence. From when Justinian ordered the foundation to be laid till the dome was finished, 5 years. The damn Bay Bridge, pardon my French, I'm so mad about this. $8 billion was spent on half a bridge, right? The one that goes from my town, Berkeley, out to the middle of the bay. It only replaced half the bridge, right, from the earthquake of 1989. Cost 7-point-some billion. And that is already sinking and rusting. You know this, right? I wouldn't want to be on that bridge in a 7.5 or higher earthquake. We can't build as well today, 15 centuries later, but they built this for the ages. 5 years is all it took to build it. So, okay, plenty of facts on the meaning. We'll wrap it up with the formal analysis. But I guess I could say, I did say, you might want to write this. You don't have to. I did say, I tell you, what am I talking about? Film history. I don't know if you've ever seen any of Liam Neeson's movies, Taken, right? I think it's the first one, I think, where his daughter is kidnapped. Starts in Paris. It ends, at least one scene here. Another one is called The International, with Naomi Watts and Clive Owen, two great British, well, she's actually Aussie, Australian. There's a chase scene. again, of international criminals trying to capture each other and, bring down a corporate empire, an evil empire, whatever. It's a great movie. The International goes all over the world. It ends here. And then my favorite is From Russia with Love. I always think of my adopted daughter when I think of that, which is the first, no, actually it's the second James Bond movie, Sean Connery. There's a chase scene from that movie set inside here. And when that scene was filmed, there were flocks, I've read this, flocks of pigeons flying around. They finally gave up and just filmed with it. In other words, it has its own atmosphere. The pigeons were flying up above, almost like in the clouds up near the top of the dome. And they just said, oh, forget it. We're going to have to go ahead and film because they were spending money staying in foreign countries before they could wrap the movie, that scene of the movie. Yeah, anyways, there's a whole bunch of movies have been seen. Not anymore, they won't be, but they used to be in this building. It's such an iconic and incredible site. Okay, now formal analysis. Yes, please go ahead. Someone had a question.
What about the name, Hagia Sophia? Is have any mean or? It
means that's a Greek for Saint Sophia, or Sophia of the Highest, which is another way of saying Saint Sophia. She was an important saint in the Byzantine or Greek Orthodox Church. There are other Hagia Sophias. There are other Notre Dames. Everybody knows about the one in Paris that nearly burned down, right? It's not the first one. Of course, you've heard of Notre Dame. Some of you, the football school in the Midwest, right? This is Indiana, where my whole mother's side of the family's from. And that has a church on the campus of that college named the Church of Notre Dame, which is French for almost the same idea, only there they mean Mary. When they say Notre Dame in Latin or Christian churches, particularly Catholic churches, they're implying they mean Mary, mother of Jesus. So this was a saint who wasn't, mother of Jesus or anything, but an important person I don't know if she's from the Bible, I can't remember. Sophia, not sure. May have been a later saint, probably was, who came along after the Bible was written. And so the Byzantine Empire, Byzantine religion, wanted to honor her with this church. So she must have been one of the most popular saints in the ancient Byzantine religion, the early Greek Orthodox. Any other questions anybody has? Before we we'll finish with the formal analysis, because go ahead, please go ahead.
Sorry, Saint Sophia is actually Sophia of Rome, and
thank you.
She died in around 304 AD, so that's probably why they revered her so much, because she was from Rome.
Yes, that would make sense. And was she a martyr? Because that's before Constantine legalized Christianity. Yes, so she probably was tortured or who knows what. You don't know the details. But yes, now I remember that. Thank you for bringing that up to everyone's attention. There are whole books written about this, documentaries about this site. I know none of you will likely ever get to Istanbul, but when you see my slides next week of not only this site, but the Blue Mosque, which is it's not as large, so you can't say it's quite as impressive, but equally beautiful with a rare blue stone and incredible mosaics and frescoes. And it's the largest mosque in Istanbul, built in reflecting the glory of this building by Muslims who chose not to make it as big out of respect for their earlier Christian. By the way, I forgot to say this. You could write this if you want. Here's a sign of the Enlightenment back in the late Middle Ages of the differences in, at least some, like the Crusades. Not exactly enlightened period of Christian history, right? In any case, during that period, when the Muslims, toward the end of the Crusades had just ended, when the Turks conquered Istanbul, they took over this building. I already said that, and they put those shields up, actually not right away, but sometime later. They converted to a mosque, but they did allow the Christians to continue worshiping here on Sundays, because their holy holiday, or holy day of the week, is Friday. And so they didn't close it off to Christian worship. So I'm not sure now with the new change back into a mosque, I doubt they're going to allow that. But that was pretty enlightened, right? And the Sultan who conquered Istanbul, or at least one of the early ones, maybe it was the second or third one, when the building was being converted into a mosque, it didn't happen overnight, right? And these shields were probably being painted, or other symbols of Islam were being created to put inside. He said to his soldiers who were starting to scrape, can you see that these are saints? With wings, supposedly up in heaven, Christian saints, of course. he told his soldiers not to damage them. He told them to leave them alone out of respect for the earlier religion. That, again, very enlightened. You know, this is in the early to mid 1400s. So yeah, that's to me interesting. You know, sometimes we can learn from ancient examples of the past more than some current ones. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So any other questions? Because I think this is, to me, it's the most exciting of all of the, and it's definitely the most important slide. I'm almost giving away what I was saying about what it might or might not be the possibility of it appearing on the final, but I don't want to say for sure. Okay, any other questions on this before we finish with a formal analysis? And then, like I said, when I officially say, okay, that you're done with the notes, I'll stick around for anybody who has other questions. Formal analysis, totally balanced, completely symmetrical, as all true Byzantine and Greek Orthodox churches are. Dynamic, of course, on the apses and the windows and these arches, stable on the columns and the walls, dynamic on the dome, so it's both. The largest mass, boy, it's a close call between this large, you could say outer apse or main apse. I guess the main apse is better, but the dome is bigger. It just, you can't see it from here. Actually, you know what? There might be one other picture here. Let me see. No, that's for yeah, see here, this is the slide I had for years that I got from the previous textbook we used to use. It doesn't capture the beauty of the place at all. It makes it look cold. Okay, so we'll just say the largest dome, mass is the dome, the main dome, and then the largest apses. And then after that, I would say it's the supporting or smaller apses in that order. That's all you have to mention. And then for space, well, you already know it's real, but here are the dimensions again. About 180, just say a little over, slightly over 182 foot tall and about 180 foot wide dome over an open cross-shaped floor plan with, I would add this, 40-foot columns on the main level, on the, ground, that's the ground level, and 20-foot high columns on the upper level. You can go up here and look down. It's fast. You'll see some of my slides, what it looks like to do that. Okay, and then we have the textures. It's all, well, not entirely, mostly real smooth marble. These are all marble. So the bottom half of the walls here, which is the recent marble added, these are from around 200 AD, maybe 100 AD. And so they're already old when they were brought here. But this is all new marble installed when the building was built, a mere 1,500 years ago. So that's all smooth, real textures. And then it's smooth, real plaster. Yeah, there we go. On the upper walls. And then smooth glass in the windows. But there is some texture on, see the angels that are painted here. And there are a whole bunch of mosaics. You're going to see some up close, which if you ever get to this building, you should, I think you could do a guided tour here if that might be the only way it'd be worth it, because, that you can get in if you're not a practicing Muslim. I'm not sure, but it would be worth it because I'm sure they let you stop and use your telephoto, right? If you have one, or just your whatever close-up lens. On whatever camera you take with you to see the details when you're standing here, right? And then aiming your camera. I had a telephoto, as in an old 35 millimeter film camera. They didn't exist in digital at this point when I was there in the 80s. So you can see this is really good simulated texture, and that's all done with paint, of course. And then there are mosaics as well. Okay, and then we have the painted line. It is painted, and visual line. The visual line around the windows and the arches, the painted line on the walls of the mosaics and frescoes. And then we have, let's see, modeling is the shadows created by the sun coming in through the windows, of course, natural modeling. And then the largest mass, balance. Yep, let's see, am I forgetting anything? I know I am something. Texture, I can't think of what I'm forgetting. Color, warm. Or did I say this? That's a matter of interpretation. I've had people say, when I stood there, it was quite dark. It was a cloudy, overcast day. There was a hurricane coming in. I'll show you the hurricane coming in off the Mediterranean. It's pretty scary. I have it in my slides from inside the mosque, looking out the windows. We ducked in there to put me and my then girlfriend to save ourselves from being blown away by a Category 2 hurricane. It's the only time I've been in a real hurricane. Anyway, these columns in my slides, it's hard to tell. They look kind of liver colored. So I guess you could call that warm. But over here, they look cool, don't they? I would say warm though, is my memory of it, even though it's over 30 years ago, would be that they have a liver, kind of tone, and that clearly has an earth tone to it. So they're warm, as are the upper walls. But some of the marble and the tinted glass in the windows, they're not fully stained glass, because that's more of a Catholic or Christian or a Western Orthodox, Protestant and Catholic specifically thing to do. Big, fancy, colorful windows are not as common in Orthodox churches. So these are bluish tinted windows. So that's cool, as are the regular marble lining on the walls, but the columns are warm color. Okay, and then it's the same up here. The mosaics and frescoes are mixtures of warm and cool colors. Okay, I think that's right where we should be in terms of the notes. So I'm going to stick around if anyone has any questions. I didn't see any of the raised hand icons, so I don't know if I should check and see if there's a question that has been submitted by chat, but I didn't see any. No. Okay, anybody have any questions about grading, extra credit, the slides we've covered? Next week is Islamic art. That's important. I will tell you at least one of those slides will be on the final, even though there's a shorter list. So that means we will end early, almost certainly earlier than tonight, which is already a tad earlier than usual. Because I'll just take a consensus. I always believe in democratic decisions. If it's applicable or appropriate, I will take a poll and see how people feel about going right all the way through and then not taking a break and ending slightly earlier that way, or taking a break earlier and still ending early, but not quite as early. We'll make that decision at the start of class next week. But those are important slides. Islamic architecture is pretty remarkable, and there'll be at least one of those slides on the final. All right, one more time, anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I sent you a message through privately on the chat.
Okay, well, I'll see if I can pull it up, because if it's there, I should be able to. Why is it not coming up on this? It says chat, and then, Okay, here we go. That's it. All right. I don't see it yet. It didn't come through yet. Do you want to resend it?
Yeah, I'll send it right now.
Okay. Yeah, I can see the window now, finally. I guess it takes a while for it to come up. I guess. Let's get. I'm looking and I just see the blank window. Anybody else, while I'm waiting to see if this have a verbal audio question that you want to ask before we call it a night? Okay, I'm still looking and I see just a blank chat window. So, and then down below it's blank where I would respond, of course, obviously, but that's,
I sent it again, but.
I wonder why it's not coming through. Hang on, I gotta try one more thing here. That's kind of frustrating. Well, maybe there is another. Let me do this. Let's see, pause recording, chat. I'm just looking to see if there's a, quote, private or individual chat option, but it just has chat, period. Okay, I see it now, I think. Right, Anna Valencia?
Yes.
Oh, okay. If you send me an email, I'll confirm it. That's a good question. I actually thought I did not mention that, I guess. Most of the time, if you have a record of it going through, you can count on it, because the internet, even if it glitches, it still eventually gets through. And I've gotten 52 exams, which, since I have 70 students, tells me that, well, actually 68 now, because 2 people had to drop, that there's still people out there that haven't logged in, but that's none of you guys. You're all on the ball. So I wouldn't worry, but I think I saw yours, Ariana, but just send me an email through the AOL, and tomorrow I'll respond to every question I have. I responded already to the ones I had today as of 5 o'clock.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll get back to you no later before 5. Anybody else have any other questions? Verbal or chat-wise? Okay, you guys have a good evening, good week. Watch the debate. If you don't care, then don't. But Thursday will be the last one. And I will see you all next Tuesday, and I will answer any emails, questions that you send me. Okay. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you're welcome.
you. Good night.
Thank all of you. Okay.